Thank you, Hugh, for talking to us. I have a few questions for you as a country operation head. Could you begin by giving us an overview about the Hello Trust as an organization, specifically what the trust mission and goal is?
Yes, certainly. The Halo Trust is the largest of the humanitarian demining organisations in the world at present. Its goals and mission are very, very simple. It is there to protect lives and restore livelihoods of those that have been affected by conflict. And it really focuses the protection of lives through the process of removing those threats, mines, explosives, or unsupervised weapons, restoring livelihoods, and that is the business of clearing the ground, making it safe, and ensuring that sustainable development can then take place on that. And the third area really is to support the management of weapons and ammunition so they can be managed in a controlled way rather than uncontrolled.
What did you describe as Hello's primary goals and priorities in Sri Lankan context today?
I think for us here, specifically in Sri Lanka, it very much captures those main themes from the Halo Trust mission statement. Our business is to clear the land. It is to do that in a safe and efficient way, in line with the international mine action standards, and support the restoration of the livelihoods for both returning IDPs and other communities, and to ultimately achieve completion here and remove the remaining mine threats.
How extensive is the problem of landmine and explosive remnants of war in Sri Lanka at present?
It's worth reinforcing the context that actually Sri Lanka was one of the most densely mined countries in the world as a result of 27 years of conflict and an estimated almost 1.5 million mines being sown. Remaining at the moment, the estimate is just under 23 kilometres square of either confirmed or suspected contamination.
Which region continues to be the most heavily contaminated, and what makes them particularly challenging?
The majority of the contamination in the Sri Lanka context is really concentrated around the north and the east. So the northern and eastern provinces and then northwest and north central. The districts that have been particularly affected and are probably the most heavily contaminated, certainly for Halo, are Jaffna, Kilinochchi and Mullaitivu, but Mannar and Vivunia, for where MAG is predominantly operating, are the other very, very heavily contaminated districts.
Could you provide any recent figures or estimates to help us understand the current scale of the problem in terms of land still contaminated, number of suspected hazardous areas, or the impact on local communities?
Yes. As I mentioned, it is approximately just under 23 square kilometres. Part of the reason that figure is still quite high, despite the fact that the mine action sector is clearing round about 6 square kilometres a year, is the discovery of new, previously unknown contamination as a result of the completion survey process, which is a government-mandated, very, very deliberate process, which is being undertaken by all the mine action operators to conduct detailed interviews with each of the Gramal Nildari village administration areas, and that has, through access to a large group of the population through the village administration and the village associations, that has what's identified quite a lot of new contamination, but it is allowing us to do it very, very thoroughly as well. So as I say, the scale is just under 23 square kilometres. We probably have about just over 5,000 IDPs that we know of who are also waiting to return to land that is likely to have been contaminated during the course of the conflict.
So, and what about the new suspected hazardous areas?
Again, there's quite a large concentration of those where the fighting was most active and where the mining was most extensive as well. So again, we're tending to find most of this in the northern and the eastern province areas.
What are the achievements and milestones for Halo so far in Sri Lanka?
I think since we began operating here in 2002, we have been successfully managed to clear and release over 200 square kilometres of land back to the communities and the IDPs that were displaced from those. And that is land that has been returned safely to them as well. I think the estimate is that's about 8,000 full cricket pitch size areas. But we've also achieved within that, we've cleared over 300,000 landmines. That was achieved this year. And that is, I think, about the second highest number of mines that have been detected and cleared by any HALO program globally since HALO was established in 1989 as well. So there, we have achieved a lot. There is still a lot to go, though.
What types of explosive devices are typically found in Sri Lanka's contaminated areas?
Yes, I mean, there are 17 different types of mine that we train all of our staff to be capable of identifying, those that work in the operational fields. The most prominent and the most common of those on the Sri Lankan security forces side that were laid during the conflict were the P4 mine and the Type 72A, which is a Chinese mine. And the LTTE manufactured their own mines. So the homemade mines, the most common of those that we find are the sort of Johnny series.
Are there any distinctive devices or pattern unique to Sri Lanka's conflict history that HALO teams often encounter?
Yes, there are. I think because this was a conflict, effectively a civil war, where the government had access to commercially bought landmines, whereas the LTTE effectively is an insurgent grouping, although it was able to capture some mines at times, or even in some instances, lift government-laid mines and then actually use those against other targets. This is unusual because they actually manufactured at large scale, almost on an industrial basis, their own landmines. So as well as the Johnny series, they also produced tilt mines, which were designed to prevent mines being moved or lifted by the security forces, which present particular challenges to us. Hence the reason it's so important for our deminers to be able to identify all 17 of the mines that are laid here so they can know exactly which ones they are able to physically remove and which, once they've identified them, need to be left in place and destroyed in place because there is too much risk with a tilt mine to ever consider.
The later one you explained was unique to Sri Lanka.
Yes, that's right. So those...
You won't get anywhere else.
The Johnny series were unique to Sri Lanka, and a number of the manufactured ones by the Tamil Tigers are not found anywhere else, including tilt mines of the type they made.
Could you explain the different methods the HALO Trust uses to identify, survey, and clear contaminated land here in Sri Lanka?
Yes, the survey sequence is really effectively the reconnaissance phase of trying to identify where the mines are quite precisely, what type of mines may be in there to prepare our clearance teams who are then going to go into that particular hazardous area. That involves both direct and indirect information gathering. We're also able to use some new technology here, LiDAR, which is a radar system which is mounted on an unmanned aerial system or a drone that can fly over the jungle but can actually use a radar to penetrate through the canopy of the trees and identify where there are defensive networks. And we know from the tactical doctrine used by both the Sri Lankan security forces, but also by the LTT, they would often lay mines within a certain distance of where they had positions to defend those. So using those techniques and satellite imagery also helps us to identify and give us the best level of detail that we can during the survey process, and then the excavation process, and the detection process very much is then dependent upon the skills of the deminers using either handheld detectors, mine labs, or those that were provided by the United States government, which are some quite specialized capabilities, or where we're able to use our mechanical assets to more deliberately clear an area in a more industrial and mechanized way.
How do you decide which method is most appropriate for a particular site?
Well, that's very much exactly the business of deciding whether we can use mechanical assets which have advantages where they are perhaps offer a greater level of protection because they're using a vehicle with armour fitted to it, both around the cab where the machine operator is working, but also around either the scoop or the bucket system, which is going to be extracting the mine. So if the mines detonate within those, it will control the explosive effect of that. So certain areas where there is very, very high levels of contamination, and that may be shrapnel areas from frontline positions, or where there is naturally occurring mineralization in the soil that makes the handheld detectors, it's much more problematic for those to operate effectively, and particularly where the land is likely to be returned to use for agricultural or residential purposes. We can actually use our mechanical assets in those areas. So perhaps Muhammali is the best example of a highly fought over frontline area which has a very high level of natural contamination that occurred during the fighting from shrapnel. There's also areas that we're going to be returning for agricultural, residential use. Our mechanical assets can operate there very, very effectively. However, in some of the other areas, such as the dense jungle areas, where we have to be very conscious of our environmental footprint, we have to make much greater use of manual detection, which is using our detection systems and then physically excavating by hand where we've detected a signal, where there is an item we suspect, maybe a mine, but equally maybe a piece of metal in there, which is much more laborious and obviously perhaps exposes an operator to a greater level of risk.
Who are the people working as deminers with Halo in Sri Lanka?
As far as possible, we try and recruit both our operations and support staff from the communities that were most affected by the conflict. And therefore, in Sri Lanka's case, as an example, 96% of our staff were IDPs, internally displaced persons during the conflict. We recruit very heavily from the Tamil communities, particularly in the north, and therefore, they have, in many instances, a personal motivation for wanting to clear the land that is around where their communities exist and making those areas safe as well. So also 43% of our operational staff are women. So they are going out every day into the field to find the mines and clear them, or supervise those that are doing it in all leadership levels as well. So we are very proud of the fact we have a very, very high level of women as operational staff and also operating in our support elements as well.
What kind of socio-economic impact does this employment have on their lives?
I think generally a very positive one. We have a range of staff from the north, from those communities most affected by the conflict. They will go through a rigorous selection and a very, very rigorous training process to ensure that they are in every way prepared and can operate safely in the minefields. But their employment brings in a regular wage. We know for a fact that we have a number of single heads of household, both female and male, where they are perhaps the only provider there. And we provide opportunities for particularly our female staff to excel in leadership positions. And obviously with those increased responsibility comes an increased salary. But certainly from our most recent staff survey, we've identified that 60% of our staff reported that the wages and the funds that they have been paid through Halo have enabled them to carry out improvements to their homes and their residences. And equally, of the remainder, 30% have actually said it's enabled them to purchase a house or land to actually build on as well. So we see the economic advantages both through the staff themselves, through their living arrangements, their opportunities to buy land for agricultural purposes, and buy vehicles, methods of transport, as well as their homes, but also obviously for the beneficiaries, the IDPs that are able to move back onto land and other people that are able to return to land, restoring their livelihoods as well. And it's a fantastic part of the job, and it's one of the most rewarding aspects, seeing how quickly the land is returned to productive use.
Demining is known to be a dangerous job. What specific risk do deminers in Sri Lanka face on a daily basis?
Yes, another very, very fair question. I mean, I think, again, to set the context, Halo as an organisation has been operating for, the best parts of 36 years. So it has a huge amount of experience with programs around the world. We are able to share those experiences. We have a very, very thorough training regime and assurance levels and leadership levels and supervisory levels for all of our staff. We are very aware that they will go into potentially hazardous environments to clear mines. So we have a full range of protective and mitigation measures, everything from the equipment they wear and ensuring that is of the appropriate standards to meet international mine action standards globally, but also the standard operating procedures that we use are very refined, and those are regularly reviewed. The supervisory methods and the quality assurance methods as well. We also ensure that we have a very, very high ratio of medically trained personnel in our team. So in every manual team, which will have 9 staff members, a third of those, so 3 of those will be qualified with high-level medical training at intermediate care provider, with 1 dedicated medic as well as an additional 2 medically trained staff. And we regularly rehearse our casualty evacuation process with a very, very exacting process to make sure we can evacuate any casualties we can treat them and move them safely to hospitalization.
At the current rate of clearance, how many years are needed to clear the mines in Sri Lanka?
I think while the current Anti-Personnel Mine Ban Convention timeline that was established is 2028, 1st of June 2028, there is recognition that largely due to the amount of additional new contamination that has been discovered as part of the completion survey as we approach a completion timeline, has extended that period, and that is recognised in the revised National Mine Action Completion Strategy that the Sri Lankan government and the President endorsed last month. The other factor that we need to take into consideration in terms of understanding how long it's likely to take us is that we are absolutely dependent upon donors providing the funding to enable us to pay for the actual mine action and the clearance processes that take place. Unfortunately, within the current global context, that funding is under quite a lot of pressure. We are enormously grateful to our international donors who continue to provide us and support us with the life-saving work that we do out here as well. But as I say, the intention of the Sri Lankan government is to get the clearest possible picture of remaining contamination through the continued completion survey, as well as at least another year's worth of clearance, which we continue to undertake on a daily basis. And then by March 2027, they will have announced a new timeline, and we'll be seeking that through the Anti-Personnel Mine Ban Convention committees to request an extension of that. So we will be waiting until that point before we confirm the final date for completion.
What are the factors affecting the mine clearing progress?
I think there's a number. I mean, Sri Lanka has environmental challenges. We have a wet season and a dry season, both of which can actually affect mine clearance as an activity. In the dry season, some areas of ground are incredibly hard because they've been baked during the intensity of the dry season. So we actually have to use water to try and soak that ground. Or there are certain areas we can leave for the wet season as a result of the fact you'll get a natural soaking effect on that. Equally, during the wet season, though, we find there are areas of mines, minefield areas that are access to them, or the actual area floods itself, which prohibits or prevents us from actually accessing those during that seasonal. So we plan carefully what tasks we do in the dry season with what tasks we do in the wet season as well. Some of the other areas that of challenges that we do face, we have to operate in some of the forestry areas, and we must ensure that we negotiate with the forestry department for gaining access to that, and particularly permissions if we do want to try and use some of our mini or in the future micro excavators as well, which leave a very, very small environmental footprint, but will help make the process safer and much more efficient and quicker if we can use those. So ensuring that we can get the necessary permissions from the forestry department through the government of Sri Lanka. So the importance of coordination between the government departments is a key factor. That also is important for us for our ability to import vehicles and spare parts, which we need to replace some of our very, very seriously aging and heavily used vehicle fleets as well, particularly for areas like ambulances where we need 4x4 capability to be able to access some of the jungle tracks to get close to a potential point if we do have somebody injured to be able to evacuate them safely.
How unearthed explosives are destroyed? What is the method?
We really have two methods. One is that we are allowed under Sri Lankan Army observation to actually burn certain types of mines that we are able to lift out of the ground. So our demining operators are trained to actually remove certain types of mines, particularly the P4 type 72 and the Rangan mines. So these need to be very, very carefully identified, cleared to manually, and then removed to a point where they can then be taken to a central area. And then because these are plastic mines, we can actually use burning as a method to mass destroy those in a controlled way. Others of the mines, and I mentioned, for instance, the tilt mines, which have an anti-handling device which makes it impossible to physically move those, and any of the other mine types. While we can excavate, identify them, we will then request the Sri Lankan Army Humanitarian Demining Unit, who work very closely with us, to bring in their explosive ordnance disposal teams, and they will actually blow those mines up in a controlled way in place. So really those are the two methods, either burning, which we can do for the mines we are able to lift safely and do in a central controlled way, or explosive ordnance disposal, which the Sri Lankan Army Humanitarian Demining Unit do and work very closely with us on that.
What kind of interaction you have with Sri Lankan government in this time?
I think we have a positive working relationship. It's a partnership. We work closely with the government of Sri Lanka. We have regular scheduled meetings, both technical working groups and operational meetings to focus on operational issues pertinent to the field, and then National Steering Committee and a higher level group, which look at some of the strategic issues, particularly increasingly those intergovernmental department issues where we need the support of other government departments to assist us to actually achieve completion here. And the importance of those and achieving consensus with those other government departments is really important for our work, whether that is getting permission from the forestry department to perhaps use a mini or a micro excavator for a particular task, or to get approvals to bring in specialist equipment or specialist vehicles that we might need to assist us with the work.
Beyond the immediate removal of the physical danger, how does demining change the lives of communities in northern and eastern Sri Lanka? How do you measure the social and economic benefits of mine clearance?
We have a number of methods which are supported by having national, again, and international mine action standards for measures of effectiveness as well. So we will apply those to a Sri Lankan context. We have survey teams and community liaison teams that will go out generally 6 months after we've finished the clearance of a particular area to engage with IDPs and beneficiaries that have benefited from the return of that land. So we get a clearer picture of, the progress for the use of that land that's been made after a period of time. So we think we get much more substantial information. But I think, cleared safe land is critical to Sri Lanka. And in particular for a number of both government programs and wider investment opportunities. We heard last month of the new government initiative, for instance, for a new coconut cultivation and growth triangle in the north, really reaching from Jaffna across to Mannar and then over to Mullaitivu. And that area is particularly an area where we're actively clearing land at the moment. So as an example, that directly supports government work, the work that we're doing at the moment in clearing areas for cultivation and growth. But we'd like to see tourists, a growing number of tourism and people returning to Jaffna in the northern province as much of the tourism that goes on in the centre and the south. And there are increasing opportunities for that as well. And we feel that we actually are contributing actively, not only to the communities there in terms of agriculture, residents, and their opportunities to live safely in that area, but also to increase investment opportunities, both for entrepreneurs across a wide range of areas and sectors.
The government of Sri Lanka has set a target of becoming landmine-free country by 2028. From your perspective, how realistic is this?
I think there is recognition by both the government of Sri Lanka, but certainly all the mine operators, that at the moment, because of the new contamination that we've found as a result of the completion process, that date is no longer realistic. That has been identified in the new revised government of Sri Lanka national mine action completion strategy that they issued last month. And while the final date yet has not been confirmed, there is recognition that the 1st of June 2028 is no longer a realistic date for the combination of the additional areas of new contamination that have been identified, but also the fact that it is more challenging for our international donors to continue to fund us at the same level. What we really would encourage them is to stay with us. We are approaching completion now, and there is an end in sight here. And I think the hugely positive thing for all of us here is Sri Lanka is a success story. We have completion in our sights, and it will provide a really fascinating example of a country that has gone from being one of the most highly densely mined areas in the world to a point where it is going to be mine impact free, and that we are getting close to that now. And I think it is a success story. And I think the people of Sri Lanka, the government, our international donors, and all the mine operators, and particularly the staff that are out there day in, day out, at significant personal risk, making, the land of this country safe and creating those opportunities for the future, for their families and for really all the families and people of Sri Lanka. And I think, there is a huge amount to be positive about here.
On a personal note, you have been a soldier involved in many conflicts around the world. Now you are doing a humanitarian work that involves explosives. What do you feel about two different words?
It provides an interesting perspective. I was a professional soldier. I was an officer in the British Army for 34 years, and you're absolutely right. I spent a huge amount. I spent almost 50% of my career on operations or dealing with operations. A lot of that in high threat environments around the world. What I have seen is the destructive power of conflict. What it can do to people, to communities, to countries. Part of the reason I joined the military was actually to protect people. And my work here in Sri Lanka is absolutely about that. It is the mission statement of Halo Trust. I very much see it as the personal reason that I chose to join Halo as a second career was to protect people. It was to remove the threat in the post-conflict environment of the explosive remnants of war and those hazards, and to make it safe for people. But our work is about protecting people and restoring those livelihoods. And it is a work that, for all the challenges every day, and the hard physical and mental work that it demands of all of us that are involved in it, particularly the people on the front line, those deminers, there is a huge amount of satisfaction of seeing the end result and the end product of safe land and restored communities. And I think, again, that is the real success for Sri Lanka and for all of our international donors, and we hope new donors as well, is to be part of that team effort to get us to that point where Sri Lanka can finally be declared mine impact free.